Have you ever felt the ground disappear from beneath your feet in a place where everyone knows you? That moment when something that should be simple, buying food, paying bills, existing, turns into public humiliation. Sarah Morrison knew exactly what it was like. She was there, standing in front of the checkout counter of the only supermarket in town, holding a basket with the bare essentials: bread, milk, eggs. When the shop owner's voice cut through the air like a razor. "I'm not giving you any more credit, teacher. You already owed too much." And the whole world stopped. Not literally, of course. People kept shopping. The air conditioning kept humming. The background music kept playing softly. But for Sarah, everything froze. Because that sentence wasn't just a denial of credit. It was a public declaration of failure. It was confirmation of what she already knew but prayed no one else would notice. She had lost everything. Sarah froze there, in front of the checkout counter, her basket still in her hand, the only item she'd come to get because her son, Ethan, needed to eat something in the morning before school. She felt the weight of all the stares turning in her direction. Some people with pity, that kind of condescending pity that hurts more than indifference. Others with blatant judgment in their eyes, as if she had done something wrong, as if poverty were a moral choice. And Sarah, who had been respected in that small town, who had been the favorite teacher, the doctor's wife, the woman everyone greeted on the street, felt shame burn her face in a way she didn't know was possible. Physical shame, visceral, the kind that makes you want to disappear, evaporate, cease to exist. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever felt that moment when your dignity is ripped away from you in front of strangers, and there's nothing you can do but endure it? Sarah was living through it. And the worst part was that her son was there. Ethan, 5 years old, with big, confused eyes, tugging at the hem of her shirt, trying to understand why his mother wasn't moving, why that woman was speaking loudly, why people were staring. He didn't understand what was happening, but he felt it. Children always feel. And Sarah, who had done everything to protect him from this reality, to hide how bad things were, saw all those layers of protection crumble in an instant. Tears threatened to fall. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold them back, because if she cried there, in front of everyone, it would be the end. It would be the definitive confirmation that she had fallen, that she was no longer worthy of respect, that she had become what small towns love and hate at the same time, an example of what happens when you lose everything. She tried to speak, tried to say something, maybe apologize, maybe promise to pay, but the words wouldn't come out. Her throat was closed, her chest tight, and all she wanted was to grab her son and run away from there, even without food, even knowing she had nothing at home to give the boy for dinner. It was at that moment that the market door opened, and something shifted in the air. A different presence entered, heavy but not threatening. Sarah didn't even look immediately. She was too busy trying to maintain a modicum of composure, but she felt it. She felt people's gazes shift from her to the door. She felt the tension change in quality. And then she heard the voice, deep, calm, carrying a natural authority that didn't need to shout to be heard. Sheriff Garrett Cole hadn't planned on stopping at the market at that exact moment. He was simply buying coffee because he'd run out at home and needed caffeine to survive his shift. But the second he opened that door and saw the scene, the woman standing at the checkout, the frightened boy, the people staring, the market owner with that cruelly superior expression, he immediately sensed the tension in the air. And something inside him, something that had to do with justice, but also was something deeper, more human, ignited. Stay with me until the end, because what happened in the next few minutes changed not only Sarah's life, but the trajectory of everyone involved. Because sometimes, all a person needs is someone to see, someone to notice, someone to choose to stand by their side when the whole world has turned its back on them. And Garrett Cole was about to become exactly that person. Not because he knew who Sarah was, not because he fully understood the situation, but because he recognized something in that moment that no one else was seeing. Dignity being destroyed. and he couldn't just watch. Garrett wasn't the type to act on impulse. 15 years as sheriff had taught him to observe first, assess the situation, understand all the variables before making any decision. But there was something about that scene, the way Sarah stood there, completely exposed, completely vulnerable, that made something shift inside him. It wasn't just about justice. It was about basic humanity. About what happens when a society decides that some people deserve dignity and others don't. He walked down the market aisle with measured, deliberate steps, unhurried but purposeful. People began to notice his presence. Some instinctively recoiled, a natural reflex when authority enters the room. Others pretended to return to their shopping, not wanting to appear involved in the scene. And Sarah, finally, looked up and saw him approaching. For a second, fear crossed her face. Fear that things would get worse. That perhaps she had broken some law she didn't know existed. That the humiliation wasn't enough, and now something worse was coming. But then Garrett reached the checkout. He didn't look at Sarah first. He looked straight at Martha, the owner of the market. And he asked a simple, direct, no-nonsense question. How much does she owe? Martha, who seconds before had been all-powerful in her indignation as a wronged shopkeeper, now hesitated. Because it's one thing to humiliate a fallen woman in front of customers. It's quite another to do it in front of the sheriff. That's none of your business, Sheriff, she replied, but her voice had lost that cruel certainty. Garrett kept his gaze fixed on her, not threatening, just present, waiting. How much? He repeated. Martha sighed, defeated by his persistence. 140 reais. And today, she's trying to take another 70 in groceries. Garrett didn't even blink. Simply took his wallet from his back pocket, pulled out 250 reais bills he was probably saving for other things. Maybe to pay his own bills at the end of the month, placed it on the counter with a decisive movement. It's paid. Everything. The old debt and today's groceries. The silence that followed was so thick, you could hear people breathing. Sarah turned to him, and the expression on her face was a devastating mix of gratitude and mortification. I can't accept this. I don't need charity. Her voice came out harsher than she intended. Because pride is literally the last thing left when you've lost everything else. It's the only thing that keeps you standing when the whole world is pushing you down. And accepting help feels like giving up, even that. It feels like admitting complete defeat. If you've ever been through something like this, if you've ever had to choose between pride and survival, share in the comments. Because I know it's not just Sarah's story. It's the story of many people. Garrett finally looked at her, and what Sarah saw in his eyes wasn't pity. It wasn't judgment. It was something rarer, more precious. It was respect. It was recognition as an equal, from human being to human being, regardless of the circumstances. It's not charity, he said, and his voice had a firm gentleness that completely disarmed her. It's a loan. You pay me back when you can. They both knew it was a gentle lie. They both knew Sarah would probably never be able to repay it. But he said it with such sincerity, with such conviction, that he transformed the lie into emotional truth, into restored dignity. Sarah stared at him for long seconds. She saw something in his face that she couldn't name. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't that kind of grand gesture people make to feel good about themselves. It was simpler than that. It was someone seeing another person in difficulty and choosing to help because it was the right thing to do, without expecting anything in return, without wanting recognition, just helping. She wanted to refuse. Every fiber of her wounded pride screamed at her to refuse to take her son and leave without accepting anything from anyone. But then she looked down at Ethan, at her 5-year-old son who was holding on to the hem of her shirt with those big, hopeful eyes, not fully understanding what was happening, but knowing it had something to do with food, with getting food. And Sarah realized this wasn't about her, wasn't about her pride. It was about making sure her son didn't go to bed hungry again. And that thought, that brutal reality of motherhood, broke her last resistance. "Thank you," she whispered. And in those 2 syllables was contained a whole universe of emotions she couldn't express. Gratitude, shame, relief, something akin to hope that she was afraid to feel because hope hurts when it's crushed. Garrett simply nodded. "You're welcome." And then, as if he hadn't just done something extraordinary, as if paying 250 reais to a stranger was the most natural thing in the world, he picked up his coffee, paid, and left the market. If this part touched you, if you felt the weight of this moment, leave a like, because it shows that you understand that not everything in life is black and white, and that sometimes the most revolutionary thing someone can do is simply choose compassion. Sarah stood there for a few more seconds, processing what had just happened. Martha, still irritated, but with no choice, packed her groceries with abrupt, angry movements. The other people in the market began to return to normal, but the stares continued. Now, with something different. Curiosity. Speculation. Who is this sheriff? Why did he help her? Could there be something between them? Gossip forming in real time, as always happens in small towns, where any kind gesture is interpreted as a potential scandal. Sarah grabbed the bags, took Ethan's hand, and left as quickly as she could without looking like she was running. But when she got outside, when the fresh air hit her face and she could finally breathe without feeling all those eyes, she stopped. She leaned against the wall of the market and let a tear fall. Just one. Because more than that would worry Ethan. "Mom, are we going to eat today?" the boy asked, looking at the bags with a hope so pure it hurt. Sarah wiped her face, crouched down to his level, and smiled. For the first time in weeks, a real smile. "Yes, my love. We're going to eat today." But as she walked back to the apartment, because the car had been repossessed by the bank 2 months ago, and now she walked everywhere, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the sheriff, about his gesture, about how he hadn't done it with fanfare, hadn't expected exaggerated gratitude, hadn't turned it into a spectacle. He had simply helped. And something inside her, something that had been frozen and protected for so long, began to melt. It wasn't attraction. Not yet. It was something deeper. It was the realization that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone in this world. If you want to follow the rest of this story and discover how this seemingly simple gesture changed everything, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because what's coming next will touch you even deeper. What neither of them knew yet was that that moment in the market hadn't been the end of anything. It had been the beginning. The beginning of a connection neither of them was looking for. The beginning of a journey that would challenge everything Sarah thought she knew about trusting someone again. And the beginning of something that would cost Garrett much more than 250 reais. It would cost him his reputation, his career, maybe even his life. Because in small towns, helping the wrong person can turn you into public enemy number 1. And Sarah's ex-husband had a lot of power, a lot of connections, and a lot of anger. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because to understand what that moment in the market meant for Sarah, you need to understand who she was before everything crumbled, before the shame, before the fall, before becoming the woman everyone looked at with pity or judgment. Sarah Morrison wasn't born poor. She hadn't grown up struggling. She had had a normal life, a good one, even. And perhaps that's why the fall hurt so much. Because when you've never gone hungry, when you've never had to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying food, when you fall from that place of comfort into the abyss, the transformation is brutal. It's disorienting. It's the kind of thing that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world and about yourself. Sarah had been an elementary school teacher for 8 years, but she wasn't just any teacher. Not one of those who do the bare minimum, who arrive on time and rush out when the bell rings. She was the teacher who arrived an hour before everyone else to prepare the day's activities, who stayed late helping struggling students, who paid for materials out of her own pocket when the school didn't have them colored pencils, notebooks, books, sometimes even lunch for a child who came hungry. She genuinely believed that education changed lives, that every child deserved attention, patience, a chance. And the results showed it. Her classes always had the best performances. Parents lined up to get a place with her. Other teachers asked for tips, advice, because Sarah had that rare gift of making children enjoy learning. And she had been married to Dr. Marcus Morrison, the town's doctor, a respected, successful cardiologist with a private practice and a loyal clientele. They had met in college, she studying education, he medicine. He was charming, ambitious, self-assured. She was dedicated, kind, and a dreamer. They seemed like the perfect couple. They married young and built a life. Together, they bought a beautiful house in a good neighborhood, one of those houses with manicured gardens and white picket fences that look like they're straight out of a magazine. Sarah decorated each room with care. She planted flowers. She made that place a home. She attended charity dinners, community events, and afternoon teas with the wives of other doctors and businessmen. She was respected, admired, even envied. People looked at her and thought, how lucky. What a perfect life. And on the outside, it really seemed that way. But behind the scenes, things were different. They always are. Marcus worked a lot, at least that's what he said. He arrived late. He left early. Weekends were on call. Conferences, medical events. Sarah understood, or tried to understand. After all, saving lives was important. She was alone in that big house, grading papers, preparing classes, taking care of Ethan when he was born, trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect professional, trying to fit into all the boxes that society expects women to fit into. But there were signs. There always are. The text messages he deleted too quickly. The different perfumes that came on his clothes. The excuses that didn't quite add up. Sarah ignored them. Because ignoring is easier than confronting. Because admitting that your marriage is a lie means admitting that you invested years of your life in something false. It means destroying the illusion of security you built. So, she ignored them until she couldn't anymore. It was an ordinary Thursday night. Marcus arrived home and simply said, without beating around the bush, without preparation, I want a divorce. I met someone, just like that, direct, as if he were announcing he was buying a new car. Sarah stood there in the kitchen, a dish towel in her hand, trying to process the words. Who? She finally asked. Julia, from nursing. Julia, 26 years old, Jim Bodie, no children, no responsibilities. Sarah was 34, stretch marks from pregnancy, accumulated fatigue, and suddenly, all those hours Marcus spent working made sense in a cruel and obvious way. She tried to save the marriage, because that's what women are conditioned to do, try to save, even when there's nothing left to save. She suggested therapy. Marcus laughed. There's nothing to save, Sarah. I don't love you anymore. Maybe I never truly loved you. Those words were more painful than betrayal, because they meant that everything had been a lie. The vows, the promises, the years, everything. The divorce was quick and brutal. Marcus had expensive lawyers. Sarah had an overworked public defender. She thought the judge would be fair, that he would consider that she had sacrificed her own career at various times to support him, that she had taken care of the house, their son, everything while he built his career. But justice and the court don't always go hand in hand. Marcus managed to keep the house, claiming he needed to maintain the standard to receive patients. He managed to pay minimal alimony, claiming Sarah had her own salary. He managed to get sporadic visits with Ethan, claiming an unpredictable medical schedule. And Sarah, who had entered that marriage with dreams and left it traumatized, was left with almost nothing. She had to leave the house she had decorated, where she had planted flowers, where she had rocked Ethan to sleep every night since he was born. She had to look for an apartment that fit her tight budget. She ended up in an old building, a small 2-bedroom apartment, with leaks in the ceiling and noisy neighbors. But it was all she could afford. A teacher's salary doesn't buy luxury. It barely buys the basics. And the town changed with her. Or rather, the way the town saw her changed. Because in a small town, divorce is a scandal. And the narrative always blames the woman. Didn't she take good care of him? She must have neglected her appearance. These women who work so much end up neglecting their marriages. Sarah heard the whispers. She saw the stares. The friends who used to call every day, they disappeared. The invitations to social events, they stopped arriving. Because a divorced woman is a threat in a small town where everyone knows everyone and most marriages are held together by fragile threads. Nobody wants the living reminder that marriage can end, that Prince Charming sometimes turns out to be a frog. At school, the change was more subtle but equally painful. The principal, who had previously praised her work publicly, began to question her. "Are you okay?" Emotionally prepared to continue teaching. As if divorce were a mental illness. As if she had lost the ability to do the job she had always done impeccably. Some parents requested transfers for their children. Not openly, no one says, "It's because you're divorced." But the excuses were transparent. "Oh, my son would adapt better with the other teacher. It's a matter of logistics." Polite lies that hurt more than harsh truths. And the other teachers, most avoided her. Not necessarily out of malice, but out of discomfort. Because Sarah had become an uncomfortable reminder that bad things happen to good people. That you can do everything right and still lose. And nobody likes to face that truth. So they avoided her. They sat at other tables in the teacher's lounge. They stopped conversations when she arrived. And Sarah felt increasingly invisible. Increasingly alone. Money started to get tight immediately. Because a teacher's salary barely covers rent, electricity, water, and the internet that Ethan needed for online classes. The alimony Marcus paid was a joke, 150 reais a month. It barely covered diapers when Ethan was younger. Now it barely covered school supplies. Sarah started obsessively calculating every penny, buying only the essentials, cutting out everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. She stopped going to the salon. She stopped buying clothes. She stopped doing anything that was for herself. And even then, it wasn't enough. She had to sell things. Furniture she had bought with such care. The leather sofa that was the pride of the living room. The solid wood dining table. Appliances. Jewelry she had received as gifts. Everything went to the used market, sold for a fraction of its real value because desperation doesn't negotiate a good price. And each sale was a piece of dignity being ripped away. The car was repossessed by the bank. She had tried to negotiate, tried to explain, but banks have no heart. They have contracts. And contracts don't care if you have a small child or if you need the car for work. So they took it. And Sarah started walking. 3 kilometers to school, 3 kilometers back. In the sun, in the rain, with Ethan complaining that his foot hurt. But she had no choice. The bus cost money she didn't have. She started skipping meals. Not because she wanted to, but because food for 2 cost less than food for 3. Ethan ate. She pretended she had eaten at work. Pretended she wasn't hungry, and her body started to show it. Clothes getting loose. Face getting too thin. Energy disappearing. But as long as Ethan ate, as long as he didn't go hungry, she endured it. That's how she got to that point in the market. In debt, begging to buy on credit, being publicly humiliated. Because her journey up to that point hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been laziness or mismanagement. It had been a system failing. It had been a woman being punished for choosing dignity. And nobody saw it. Nobody until Garrett walked through that door and decided to really look. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because to understand what that moment in the market meant for Sarah, you need to understand who she was before everything crumbled, before the shame, before the fall, before becoming the woman everyone looked at with pity or judgment. Sarah Morrison wasn't born poor. She hadn't grown up struggling. She had had a normal life, a good one, even. And perhaps that's why the fall hurt so much. Because when you've never gone hungry, when you've never had to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying food, when you fall from that place of comfort into the abyss, the transformation is brutal. It's disorienting. It's the kind of thing that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world and about yourself. Sarah had been an elementary school teacher for 8 years. But she wasn't just any teacher, not one of those who do the bare minimum, who arrive on time and rush out when the bell rings. She was the teacher who arrived an hour before everyone else to prepare the day's activities, who stayed late helping struggling students, who paid for materials out of her own pocket when the school didn't have them colored pencils, notebooks, books, sometimes even lunch for a child, who came hungry. She genuinely believed that education changed lives, that every child deserved attention, patience, a chance, and the results showed it. Her classes always had the best performances. Parents lined up to get a place with her. Other teachers asked for tips, advice, because Sarah had that rare gift of making children enjoy learning. And she had been married to Dr. Marcus Morrison, the town's doctor. A respected, successful cardiologist with a private practice and a loyal clientele. They had met in college, she studying education, he medicine. He was charming, ambitious, self-assured. She was dedicated, kind, and a dreamer. They seemed like the perfect couple. They married young and built a life together. They bought a beautiful house in a good neighborhood. One of those houses with manicured gardens and white picket fences that look like they're straight out of a magazine. Sarah decorated each room with care. She planted flowers. She made that place a home. She attended charity dinners, community events, and afternoon teas with the wives of other doctors and businessmen. She was respected, admired, even envied. People looked at her and thought, how lucky, what a perfect life. And on the outside, it really seemed that way. But behind the scenes, things were different. They always are. Marcus worked a lot, or at least that's what he said. He arrived late. He left early. Weekends were on call, conferences, medical events. Sarah understood, or tried to understand. After all, saving lives was important. She was alone in that big house, grading papers, preparing classes, taking care of Ethan when he was born, trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect professional, trying to fit into all the boxes that society expects women to fit into. But there were signs. There always are. The text messages he deleted too quickly. The different perfumes that came on his clothes. The excuses that didn't quite add up. Sarah ignored them, because ignoring is easier than confronting. Because admitting that your marriage is a lie means admitting that you invested years of your life in something false. It means destroying the illusion of security you built. So she ignored them. Until she couldn't anymore. It was an ordinary Thursday night. Marcus arrived home and simply said, without beating around the bush, without preparation, I want a divorce. I met someone, just like that, direct, as if he were announcing he was buying a new car. Sarah stood there in the kitchen, a dish towel in her hand, trying to process the words. Who? She finally asked. Julia, from nursing. Julia, 26 years old, gym body, no children, no responsibilities. Sarah was 34, stretch marks from pregnancy, accumulated fatigue. And suddenly, all those hours Marcus spent working made sense in a cruel and obvious way. She tried to save the marriage. Because that's what women are conditioned to do, try to save, even when there's nothing left to save. She suggested therapy. Marcus laughed. There's nothing to save, Sarah. I don't love you anymore. Maybe I never truly loved you. Those words were more painful than betrayal, because they meant that everything had been a lie. The vows, the promises, the years, everything. The divorce was quick and brutal. Marcus had expensive lawyers. Sarah had an overworked public defender. She thought the judge would be fair, that he would consider that she had sacrificed her own career at various times to support him, that she had taken care of the house, their son, everything, while he built his career. But justice and the court don't always go hand in hand. Marcus managed to keep the house, claiming he needed to maintain the standard to receive patients. He managed to pay minimal alimony, claiming Sarah had her own salary. He managed to get sporadic visits with Ethan, claiming an unpredictable medical schedule. And Sarah, who had entered that marriage with dreams and left it traumatized, was left with almost nothing. She had to leave the house she had decorated, where she had planted flowers, where she had rocked Ethan to sleep every night since he was born. She had to look for an apartment that fit her tight budget. She ended up in an old building, a small 2-bedroom apartment, with leaks in the ceiling and noisy neighbors, but it was all she could afford. A teacher's salary doesn't buy luxury. It barely buys the basics. And the town changed with her. Or rather, the way the town saw her changed. Because in a small town, divorce is a scandal. And the narrative always blames the woman. Didn't she take good care of him? She must have neglected her appearance. These women who work so much end up neglecting their marriages. Sarah heard the whispers. She saw the stares. The friends who used to call every day, they disappeared. The invitations to social events, they stopped arriving. Because a divorced woman is a threat in a small town where everyone knows everyone, and most marriages are held together by fragile threads. Nobody wants the living reminder that marriage can end, that Prince Charming sometimes turns out to be a frog. At school, the change was more subtle but equally painful. The principal, who had previously praised her work publicly, began to question her. "Are you okay?" Emotionally prepared to continue teaching, as if divorce were a mental illness, as if she had lost the ability to do the job she had always done impeccably. Some parents requested transfers for their children. Not openly, no one says, "It's because you're divorced." But the excuses were transparent. "Oh, my son would adapt better with the other teacher. It's a matter of logistics." Polite lies that hurt more than harsh truths. And the other teachers, most avoided her, not necessarily out of malice, but out of discomfort. Because Sarah had become an uncomfortable reminder that bad things happen to good people. That you can do everything right and still lose. And nobody likes to face that truth. So they avoided her. They sat at other tables in the teacher's lounge. They stopped conversations when she arrived. And Sarah felt increasingly invisible, increasingly alone. Money started to get tight immediately. Because a teacher's salary barely covers rent, electricity, water, and the internet that Ethan needed for online classes. The alimony Marcus paid was a joke. 150 reais a month. It barely covered diapers. When Ethan was younger now, it barely covered school supplies. Sarah started obsessively calculating every penny, buying only the essentials, cutting out everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. She stopped going to the salon. She stopped buying clothes. She stopped doing anything that was for herself. And even then, it wasn't enough. She had to sell things. Furniture she had bought with such care. The leather sofa that was the pride of the living room. The solid wood dining table. Appliances. Jewelry she had received as gifts. Everything went to the used market, sold for a fraction of its real value, because desperation doesn't negotiate a good price. And each sale was a piece of dignity being ripped away. The car was repossessed by the bank. She had tried to negotiate, tried to explain, but banks have no heart. They have contracts. And contracts don't care if you have a small child or if you need the car for work. So they took it. And Sarah started walking. 3 kilometers to school. 3 kilometers back. In the sun, in the rain. With Ethan complaining that his foot hurt. But she had no choice. The bus cost money she didn't have. She started skipping meals. Not because she wanted to, but because food for 2 cost less than food for 3. Ethan ate. She pretended she had eaten at work, pretended she wasn't hungry, and her body started to show it. Clothes getting loose, face getting too thin, energy disappearing. But as long as Ethan ate, as long as he didn't go hungry, she endured it. That's how she got to that point in the market, in debt, begging to buy on credit, being publicly humiliated, because her journey up to that point hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been laziness or mismanagement. It had been a system failing. It had been a woman being punished for choosing dignity. And nobody saw it. Nobody until Garrett walked through that door and decided to really look. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened inside Garrett at that moment was something he himself couldn't fully explain. It wasn't love at first sight. He didn't believe in such things. It wasn't performative heroism. He detested people who helped only to feel good about themselves. It was something more visceral, more instinctive. It was recognition. The kind of recognition that happens when you see in another something you know intimately because you've lived it, or because you saw someone you loved live it. And Garrett had seen it in his own mother, years before, when their father had abandoned the family and she had been left alone with 3 young children. He remembered how she lost weight while they gained weight, how she smiled saying she had already eaten when clearly she hadn't, the fragile dignity she maintained even when the whole world judged her. Garrett Cole knew Sarah by sight. Everyone knew everyone in a town of 10,000 inhabitants where secrets lasted for hours and gossip lived for decades. He knew she was a teacher at the municipal school. He knew about the divorce because everyone knew. In a small town, other people's tragedy is collective entertainment. He had seen her a few times on the street, always with her son, always in a hurry, always seeming to carry the world on her shoulders. But he had never really paid attention. Not in the way that matters. Not in the way that sees beyond the surface. Up to that point in the market, he'd gone in just to buy coffee. Simple routine. He was in the middle of his shift. He needed caffeine to survive the next few hours of patrolling in a city where usually nothing happened besides bar fights and teenagers speeding. But the second he opened that door and heard the loud voice of the shop owner, that tone that carried cruelty disguised as business pragmatism, something stopped inside him. It wasn't the volume, it was the quality. It was that specific kind of public humiliation he recognized because he'd seen it happen to vulnerable people his whole life. The tone people use when they feel they have power over someone who can't fight back. He stopped there, still near the door, and observed. He saw Sarah standing in front of the checkout counter, holding that basket with hands that trembled slightly. He saw her posture straight back, chin up, desperately trying to maintain composure, while the world crumbled around her. He saw the little boy holding the hem of his mother's shirt, confused, scared, feeling the tension without fully understanding what was happening. And then Garrett saw something that no one else in that market was seeing. Something that required real attention, trained observation, or perhaps just basic humanity that most people had lost. Sarah was too thin. Not thin from the gym, from a carefully chosen diet. Thin from starvation. Thin from a body consuming itself because it didn't have enough fuel. The clothes, which had probably been well-fitted months ago, hung loosely, hanging at the shoulders, thighs, and hips. Her face had that hollow quality that comes from prolonged malnutrition. Overly prominent cheekbones, sunken eyes, cracked lips, and she trembled. Not from anger, as one might assume, not from social nervousness, but from physical exhaustion. The kind that comes when the body has been operating at its absolute limit for too long. Garrett had seen a lot in his life. 15 years as a police officer in a small town, 5 years before that in larger cities. He had seen poverty in all its forms. He had seen despair. He had seen people pretending to be okay when they clearly weren't. He had developed that sixth sense that good police officers have the ability to read body language, to see beyond words, to sense when something is profoundly wrong, even when everyone pretends everything is fine, and all his instincts were screaming now. Sarah wasn't just experiencing temporary financial hardship. She was spiraling. She was drowning. And nobody in that crowded market was seeing it. Or worse, they were seeing it and choosing to ignore it. He observed the other people. Some looked with superficial pity. The kind of pity that lasts 3 seconds before they return to their own lives. Others looked with poorly disguised judgment. How did she let it get to this point? She must have done something wrong. She must have been irresponsible. Because it's more comfortable to blame the victim than to admit that the system is broken. That bad things happen to good people. That any one of us is 3 crises away from being exactly where Sarah was. And then something inside Garrett made a decision. It wasn't a rational process. It wasn't him weighing the pros and cons. It was a moral, visceral impulse. The kind that defines character. The kind of decision you make in seconds, but that reverberates for years. He walked to the cashier. He asked that question, and everything changed. But the true impact of that moment only became apparent later, because when Garrett left the market after paying, after refusing thanks, after acting as if he hadn't just done something extraordinary, he couldn't simply go back to work and forget. He couldn't process it as just another case, another person helped. Something had stayed with him. The image of Sarah, the trembling in her hands, the way she had looked at him, with that heartbreaking mixture of gratitude and shame. So he did what sheriff does when something doesn't seem right. He investigated. Not officially. Not with paperwork and formal procedures. But he investigated. He talked to people. He asked casual questions. He pieced together the puzzle. And the more he discovered, the worse it got. Sarah was 3 months behind on her rent. The landlord had already started eviction proceedings. She had sold practically everything of value she owned. Her car had been repossessed. She walked miles every day because she didn't have money for bus fare. And she was doing all this alone, while caring for a young child and holding down a full-time job as a teacher. But the revelation that really made Garrett's blood boil was finding out about her ex-husband, Dr. Marcus Morrison. Garrett knew him. Everyone knew him. Respected doctor, big house, imported car, new girlfriend he showed off around town like a trophy. And the son of a bitch paid 150 reais in alimony. 150. Garrett spent that much on groceries in a week. Marcus spent that much on dinner. And he had let Sarah, the mother of his child, get to the point of starving. Garrett felt anger. Not explosive, unproductive anger, but the cold, focused anger that made him good at his job. The anger that comes from witnessing injustice and having the power to do something about it. He went back to his office, sat in his chair, and started making calls. He called a lawyer friend. He asked about pension laws, about the review process. He called the county social worker. He asked about assistance, programs. He called the school principal. He asked very casually about Sarah, about how she was doing professionally. And he uncovered more hidden truths. The principal was under pressure to fire her. Not because she was a bad teacher, everyone agreed she was excellent, but because some influential parents had complained. Parents who were friends with Dr. Morrison, who played golf with him, who didn't want the problematic ex-wife teaching their children. It was systematic persecution. It was coordinated cruelty. And Marcus was behind it all, even if he never directly got his hands dirty. Garrett then realized the whole truth. Sarah wasn't just fighting poverty. She was fighting an active campaign to destroy her. And the worst was yet to come. Because Garrett also discovered that Marcus had filed for a custody review, claiming that Sarah wasn't adequately equipped to care for their son. And with all his resources, all his connections, all the fabricated evidence about her financial situation, he had a real chance of winning. This changed everything for Garrett. It transformed her from a woman going through hardship who deserved help, to a woman being actively destroyed by a powerful man and a corrupt system that allowed it to happen. And Garrett hated injustice. She hated it with every fiber of her being. She had joined the police force precisely for that reason, because she believed, perhaps naively, that she could make a difference. that she could protect those who couldn't protect themselves. So he made another decision. He wasn't just going to help Sarah with food or money. He was going to enter this war. He was going to use every resource he had, every connection, every ounce of authority that the sheriff's position conferred. He was going to protect her. Not because he was obligated, not because it was procedure, but because it was right. And if it cost him his career, so be it. Some battles are worth more than personal safety. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because what happened in the days following that encounter at the market was the slow and inevitable building of a connection that neither of them was looking for, but that both desperately needed. Sarah went home that day carrying not only shopping bags, but also a new and confusing weight in her chest. Gratitude, yes, but also renewed shame. Because accepting help even when you have no choice feels like an admission of failure. It seems to confirm everything people whisper about you, that you can't manage on your own, that you are weak, that you need to be saved. She prepared dinner for Ethan that night with hands that still trembled. Simple pasta, but with real sauce this time. Chicken, salad, normal things that had become a luxury for her. She sat and watched her son eat with that voracious appetite that children have, and felt something tighten in her throat. Because for how long had she failed at this? How many nights had he gone to bed hungry without complaining because he had already learned that complaining didn't change anything? Ethan looked at her with those big, innocent eyes. "Mom, aren't you going to eat?" And Sarah lied again. "I already ate, my love." You eat. Because even though there was food now, the habit of depriving herself had become automatic. Because mothers do that. They make sure their child eats first, second, third. And if there's anything left over, maybe she'll eat that, too. But this time there was nothing left. And for the first time in weeks, Sarah went to sleep knowing that her son had eaten properly. And that, more than anything else, made the shame of having accepted help worthwhile. That night, she dreamed, not a nightmare, as had become her custom, but something different. She dreamed of the sheriff, of the way he had looked at her, not with pity, not with judgment, but with, what, respect, understanding. Something she couldn't name, but that had affected her in ways she didn't understand. Garrett, on the other hand, couldn't sleep. He stayed awake thinking about Sarah, how thin she was, the trembling in her hands, the way her son looked at her with a concern a 5-year-old shouldn't have. He had done the right thing at the market. He knew that, but he also knew that 250 reais wouldn't solve anything. It was like a band-aid on a hemorrhage. Sarah needed real help, sustained help, and he didn't know how to do that, without seeming invasive, without making her feel even more exposed. So he started slowly, discreetly. 2 days after the incident at the market, he stopped by the school at the end of the day. He pulled his car over near the exit and waited. When Sarah came out alone, because Ethan stayed with a neighbor until she picked him up, she saw the car and hesitated. For a second, it seemed like she was going to turn and walk out the other side. But then Garrett got out, walked over to her. "Hi," she replied, her voice cautious. Thank you, again, for what you did." Garrett nodded as if it were nothing. "Look, I know you have to pick up your son. Can I give you a ride? I'm going in that direction anyway." Obvious lie. He wasn't going in that direction. But Sarah was too tired to question it. Too tired to refuse. And there was something about him, something in his calm presence, in the way he didn't pressure her that made her feel safe. So she accepted. She got into the car, and during those 15 minutes of comfortable silence on the way to her neighbor's house, Sarah realized something. She hadn't spoken to an adult in months who wasn't having a professional transaction or a conflict. She simply hadn't had company. And that hurt in a way she hadn't expected. Garrett began to appear frequently. Never in an obvious way. Never creating a predictable pattern that fueled gossip. But he appeared. He offered her a ride when he saw her walking. He showed up at school. with excuses about routine security checks that no one believed, but that provided plausible cover. And little by little, Sarah stopped resisting. She stopped seeing each of his gestures as charity and began to see them as, what? Care? Genuine attention? Friendship she didn't know? But she knew that for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. One night, Garrett showed up at her apartment with a toolbox. "I heard your door isn't closing properly." Sarah blinked. Surprised. "How did you? Who told you?" He gave a half smile. "Small town. Everyone knows everything." It wasn't a real answer, but she let it go. He fixed the door. Then he fixed the stuck window. Then the dripping kitchen faucet. Small repairs the landlord never did because a tenant in trouble has no bargaining power. And while he worked, Ethan stood beside him, watching, fascinated, asking 1,000 questions. "Why do you use tools like that? How did you learn to fix things? Can you teach me?" And Garrett, with infinite patience, answered everything. He explained. He let the boy hold the tools. He taught. And Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway with a tightness in her chest, because she saw her son finding in Garrett something that his own father had never given him: presence, attention, genuine interest. Marcus had never played with Ethan like that. He had never had the patience for childish questions. He was always busy, important, without time. But there was the town sheriff, a man with real responsibilities, finding time to teach a 5-year-old boy how to use a screwdriver. By the time Garrett finished the repairs, it was late. Ethan had already eaten dinner pasta again, but this time with chicken that Garrett had brought that was going to spoil in his fridge. Sarah offered coffee. They sat at the small kitchen table, and for the first time, they really talked. Not hasty little thank yous, not empty polite phrases, but real conversation. Garrett asked about her job. Sarah talked about teaching, about how even with everything that was happening, entering that classroom still made sense, about how the children didn't judge. They didn't care if she was divorced or poor. They only cared if she was a good teacher, and she was. Sarah asked about his job. Garrett talked about the contradiction of being a police officer in a small town where most of the time was absolute boredom. But when something happened, the responsibility was immense because you knew everyone. You knew the victims. You knew the suspects. You knew the families. Everything was personal. And then, perhaps because she was too tired to keep her guard up, perhaps because he had that way of listening that made a person want to talk, Sarah told him. She told him about the marriage, about the betrayals, about the brutal divorce, about how the city had turned its back on her, about the constant fear of losing Ethan, about the sleepless nights doing calculations that never added up, about the shame, the loneliness, the exhaustion that never went away. She told him everything, and she cried. Not that controlled crying of someone still trying to maintain composure, but real, deep crying from someone who had held on for too long. Garrett didn't try to fix things. He didn't offer empty solutions or generic motivational phrases. He just listened. And when she finished, when she was finally speechless and just sitting there with a wet face and her soul exposed, he placed his hand over hers on the table. "You don't deserve any of this. You know that, right?" His voice was low but firm. "Nothing that happened is your fault. Nothing." And Sarah, who had spent months blaming herself, questioning herself, wondering what she had done wrong, felt something break inside her. Not break in the sense of collapsing, but break in the sense of releasing. Like a dam that finally gives way and lets the water flow. She looked at him through her tears, and she saw something in his eyes that both frightened and comforted her. She saw care. She saw anger not at her, but for her. She saw determination, and she saw something else. Something neither of them was ready to name yet, but which was there, growing, inevitable. Connection. Not superficial physical attraction, but a deep recognition of two souls that had been hurt by the world and who found in each other something akin to healing. Garrett left that night knowing he had crossed the line, Not a physical line, but an emotional one. He was no longer just helping a citizen in need. He was investing. He was caring. He was getting involved in ways that went beyond the professional. And that was dangerous. Because in a small town, everything is observed. Everything is interpreted. And if someone noticed, especially if her ex-husband noticed, it could be used against Sarah. It could be turned into ammunition in the custody battle. But even knowing this, even understanding the risks, Garrett couldn't stop. Because, for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. With real purpose, not just fulfilling a function, but making a difference in the life of someone who really mattered. And Sarah, despite all her fears, despite all her hesitation, began to trust. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry everything alone. That maybe it was okay to let someone help, to let someone in, to let someone stay. Now I want to delve even deeper into this matter, because what Garrett discovered, behind the scenes, while Sarah was trying to rebuild some normalcy in her life, was far worse than anyone could have imagined. The hidden truth behind that facade of a peaceful town was that there was a coordinated, deliberate campaign to completely destroy Sarah Morrison. And at the center of it all was Dr. Marcus Morrison, moving pieces as if it were a game of chess, where the only possible loser was the mother of his child. Garrett had begun the investigation almost casually, simply wanting to better understand the situation so he could help more effectively. But the deeper he dug, the more layers of cruelty he uncovered. The eviction process, for example. Garrett went to speak with the landlord, a 60-year-old man who owned 3 properties in the city and lived off the rent. Why are you evicting her? She always paid on time. The man looked away. Look, Sheriff, it's nothing personal. But 3 months late. I have bills to pay too. Garrett insisted. But she was always a good tenant before the divorce, wasn't she? The man hesitated, then sighed. Look, someone called me, said it would be better if I got rid of her while I could. That she was going to cause trouble. Garrett felt his blood run cold. Who called? The landlord wouldn't say, but Garrett saw it in his eyes. He saw the fear, he saw the pressure, and he understood. Marcus had reach, he had influence, and he was using it to isolate Sarah in every way possible, taking away her home, creating evidence of instability that he could use in the custody process. It was a calculated and perverse strategy. But that was just the beginning. Garrett discovered that Sarah had tried to get a loan from 2 banks. Both denied her. She had a reasonable credit score, a stable job, but they still refused. Garrett called the manager of one of the banks, a guy he knew from community events. Why did you deny Sarah Morrison's loan? The manager looked uncomfortable. Garrett, you know I can't discuss client information. I'm not asking as a client. I'm asking because something doesn't add up. She has a job. She has a track record. Why deny it? Long pause. Then, look, between us, we've received instructions from above not to approve anything related to her. Don't ask me any more than that. Top-down guidance. Marcus again, or his friends, or both. His web of influence was larger than Garrett had imagined, and the impact of that on Sarah's life was devastating. She couldn't get credit. I couldn't rent another place. I was being systematically strangled financially, and most people didn't even realize it was intentional. They thought it was just bad luck, mismanagement, natural consequences of divorce. But the revelation that truly made Garrett understand the depth of Marcus's cruelty was discovering the custody review process. He obtained copies of the documents soon officially, but he had friends at the court. He read everything with growing horror. Marcus claimed that Sarah had demonstrated emotional instability, that she was failing to provide an adequate environment for the child's development, that she showed signs of neglect and chronic financial incapacity. Each sentence was constructed to sound like paternal concern, but it was a direct, cruel attack, supported by evidence that Marcus had orchestrated. He had photos of Sarah's small apartment. He had documents showing her debts. He had statements from concerned witnesses, parents of students who were friends of his, who had never spoken to Sarah, but who were willing to say that she seemed distracted or emotionally unstable. It was complete fabrication. It was legalized harassment, and the worst part, it was working. The judge assigned to the case was Marcus's golf buddy. The social worker who was going to do the evaluation had already been influenced by the concerns raised. Garrett read it all, sitting alone in his office at 2 a.m, and felt a rage he hadn't felt in years. Not impulsive rage, but righteous rage. Rage that comes from witnessing such obvious, cruel injustice being perpetrated against someone who had no way to defend herself. Because Sarah didn't have an expensive lawyer. She didn't have connections. She didn't have the money to hire a private investigator or PR to control the narrative. She only had herself, and an overworked public defender who barely had time to properly read the case file. The danger wasn't just financial. Garrett realized this. With painful clarity, the real, immediate danger was Sarah losing Ethan. And if that happened, if she lost her son, the only thing that still gave meaning to her struggle, Garrett knew what would happen. He had seen it before. He had seen mothers lose children under unjust circumstances. Seen the light go out in their eyes. Seen some never recover. And some made permanent decisions about problems that seemed unsolvable. He wasn't going to let that happen. Not with Sarah. But there was a complexity that Garrett couldn't ignore. Marcus wasn't doing this because he wanted his son. Records showed he barely visited Ethan. He paid the minimum child support and late. He didn't attend school events. He didn't call. He didn't care. So why fight for custody? The answer was simple and sinister. Punishment. Marcus wanted to punish Sarah for asking for a divorce, for exposing his infidelities, for not accepting to remain silent and submissive while he lived a double life, for choosing dignity over conformity. And the cruelest way to punish a mother is by taking her child away. Marcus knew this, and he was using the system that was supposed to protect children as a personal weapon against the woman he swore to love. This was beyond cruel. It was monstrous. And it revealed something about his character that Garrett realized the entire town had ignored. Everyone saw the respectable doctor, the successful professional, the charming man. No one saw the manipulative sociopath who used his position and power to destroy anyone who opposed him. Garrett began to strategize. He couldn't officially intervene. He didn't have jurisdiction in family law cases, but he could use the resources he had. He started by documenting everything. Every time Marcus failed to show up for visits with Ethan, every late child support payment, every inconsistency between what Marcus claimed in court and what he actually did. Garrett also began discreetly talking to people. Teachers, Sarah's neighbors, gathering testimonials that she was an exemplary mother, that the boy was well cared for, happy, and healthy. But he knew that might not be enough. Because Marcus had lawyers who knew how to weaponize anything. They knew how to argue that a small apartment was negligence, that debts were irresponsibility, that accepting help from strangers like Garrett was evidence of instability. They would twist everything. And the system, more often than not, favored those who had the money to hire the best distortions of the truth. Sarah didn't know any of this yet. Garrett hadn't told her. He didn't want to scare her. He didn't want to take away the little piece she had gained. But he knew he needed to tell her soon. Because the hearing was scheduled, 3 weeks, and Sarah needed to be prepared. She needed to understand what she was facing. She needed a chance to fight. One night, Garrett went to her apartment after Ethan had fallen asleep. Sarah opened the door and immediately sensed something was wrong. What is it? Garrett went inside, closed the door, and sat in the old kitchen chair. I need to tell you something, and it's going to hurt, but you need to know. And then he told her everything. The custody battle, the allegations, the fabricated evidence, the hearing, Marcus's real chances of getting what he wanted. Sarah stood completely still as she listened. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just stood there, processing each word as if it were a punch to the gut. When Garrett finished, the silence that followed was deafening. Then, finally, in a completely empty voice, "He'll succeed, won't he? He'll take Ethan from me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. It was an acceptance of defeat before the battle even began. And that's what broke something in Garrett. Seeing Sarah, this woman who had fought so hard, who had endured so much, finally giving up. "No," he said, and his voice came out with a force that surprised them both. "He won't succeed. Because I won't let him." Sarah looked at him with empty eyes. "How, Garrett? You saw what he has. Lawyers, money, a friendly judge. I have nothing." Garrett leaned forward. "You have the truth. And you have me. And I will use every resource I have, every connection, every ounce of influence this position holds, to ensure you don't lose your son." Sarah started to cry then, not from sadness, from something more complicated. Gratitude mixed with the fear of hope. Because hope hurts when you've been disappointed so many times. "Why are you doing this?" she asked through her tears. "Why do you care so much?" And Garrett realized that the moment of truth had arrived. He could lie, say it was just his job, just a sense of justice. But Sarah deserved honesty, because you matter. Not as a case, not as a duty, but as a person, as a woman, as someone I care about more than I should. The air shifted between them. Something was said without words. Something was acknowledged without explicit confession. And Sarah, despite the fear, despite everything, felt something begin to rebuild itself within her. Not naive hope, but something more solid. Renewed determination. Because she was no longer alone. And that changed everything. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the internal conflict Garrett faced in the days following that conversation with Sarah was the kind of moral dilemma that defines who a person truly is. It's not about what you do when the choices are easy, when right and wrong are clearly marked. It's about what you do when both options cost something precious. When any decision will leave scars. When you have to choose between what is legal and what is just, and discover that sometimes those two things are not the same. Garrett stayed up all night after leaving Sarah's apartment. He returned home an empty house where he'd lived alone since his divorce 5 years ago. Sat at the kitchen table with the court documents spread out in front of him. Each page he read increased his anger and helplessness. Because it was all there. Marcus's cruel strategy, the fabricated allegations, the bought witnesses, the system being manipulated by someone with enough resources to twist any truth. And there he was, Garrett Cole, sheriff of a small town, looking at it all and knowing that technically he had no power to intervene. Jurisdiction. That word kept echoing in his head. He had no jurisdiction. Child custody was a matter of family law. Civil, not criminal. There was nothing he could do officially. No crime had been committed, at least not a crime that the prosecution would pursue. Marcus was using a perfectly legal system to destroy someone, and that was allowed. That was, in fact, how the system worked when you had enough money to hire the right people. But Garrett also knew that if he stood by, if he watched this injustice unfold without doing anything, Sarah would lose Ethan. And that wouldn't just be a legal defeat. It would be total destruction. He had seen the way she looked at her son. He had seen how every decision she made, every sacrifice, every struggle, was for that boy. Ethan wasn't just her son. He was her reason for living. And if Marcus managed to take that away, Garrett didn't even want to imagine what would happen to Sarah afterward. The problem was that if he got involved, if he used his position as sheriff to help Sarah in any way, there would be real consequences. Marcus had powerful friends. The mayor Douglas Chum played golf with him every Sunday. The judge in the case, Harold Pemberton, had been his college classmate. The district attorney had received campaign donations from him. The web of influence was vast and strategically positioned. And if Garrett made a fuss, if he challenged these people, they would retaliate. Not directly, never directly, but in ways that mattered. It could start with questioning his conduct. The sheriff is showing undue favoritism. There's a conflict of interest. He's using official authority for personal gain. It wouldn't have to be true. It would just have to be said enough, in the right rooms, to the right people. And suddenly, the career Garrett had built over 15 years would be under investigation. The reputation he had cultivated would be tarnished. The respect he commanded would be questioned. And it wasn't just about him. Garrett had a team. He had 5 officers who depended on him. He had a community that trusted him. If he fell from grace, it would affect everyone. It could mean losing the election for the position, which happened every 4 years. It could mean being forced to resign. It could mean never working in law enforcement again. And then what? He was 42 years old. Police work was all he knew how to do. It was who he was. But while these pragmatic thoughts swirled in his head, another voice, deeper, more insistent, kept asking, "So you're going to let a child be used as a weapon? You're going to let a good mother lose her son because you're afraid of losing your job?" And that question hurt. It hurt because it touched on the very reason Garrett had joined the police force in the first place. He remembered his own childhood. His abusive father, who finally left when Garrett was 10. His mother struggling alone to raise 3 children. The times social workers showed up at their house because someone had filed a complaint. The times he had stayed awake at night, afraid they would take him and his siblings away from their mother, not because she was bad, but because she was poor. Because the system often confuses poverty with neglect. And he remembered the policewoman who had shown up one of those times. Officer Janet Morrison, no relation to Sarah, but the last name now seemed like some kind of sign. She had seen the situation. She had seen a devoted mother doing her best. And she had written a favorable report. She had sided with them. She had protected that family. And Garrett remembered thinking, even as a child, when I grow up, I'm going to be a police officer too. I'm going to protect people like she protected us. That thought had guided his entire career. Every decision, every day he put on that uniform. To serve and protect wasn't an empty slogan for him. It was a mission. It was a purpose. So what did that mean now? Was he going to abandon that purpose because it was inconvenient? Because it cost too much? Because the right people might get angry? Garrett looked at the plaque on his office wall, the same plaque every police department had. Serve and protect. And for the first time in years, he really thought about what those words meant. Serve whom? The system? The powerful people? Or the vulnerable people the system failed? Protect what? His own career? The status quo? Or protect those who truly needed protection? The answer should be obvious. But obvious choices aren't always easy. Garrett knew that if he chose to help Sarili help, not just small gestures, but active involvement in fighting her case, he would be crossing a line he couldn't uncross. He would be putting a target on his own back. He would be choosing one person over the entire system, and that was what heroism, or stupidity. He thought of Sarah, of the way she had looked at him when he promised not to let her lose Ethan, of how hope had returned to those eyes that had been so empty before, of the trust she had placed in him, trust she didn't place in anyone else, because everyone had already failed her. And he realized something fundamental. If he backed down now, if he let fear of personal consequences dictate his actions, he would destroy that trust. He would confirm to Sarah that she was right not to trust anyone, that everyone eventually abandons, that promises mean nothing. And worse than that, he was going to destroy something within himself. He was going to have to look in the mirror and see himself as a coward. He was going to have to live knowing that when it truly mattered, when there was a real chance to make a difference, he chose personal safety over doing the right thing. And Garrett knew he couldn't live with that. Some men can. They can rationalize. They can sleep at night after making a pragmatic choice. But he wasn't one of those men. So, sitting there at 4 a.m, surrounded by documents and cold coffee, Garrett made a decision. Wasn't a dramatic decision with background music and a moment of cinematic clarity. It was a tired, heavy, but absolute decision. He was going to help Sarah, officially or not, with the system's permission or against it. Even if it cost him his career, even if it cost him his reputation. Because some battles are worth more than personal safety, and this was one of them. But he needed to be clever. He couldn't just attack head-on. Marcus and his friends were going to crush any direct opposition. Garrett needed to be strategic. He needed to use the resources he had without crossing lines that would give ammunition to the enemy. He needed to help Sarah in ways that were defensibly, least technically, and he had some ideas. First, documentation. Garrett would document every one of Marcus's failures as a father, every missed visit, every late payment, every broken promise. He would build a pattern of paternal neglect that completely contradicted the image Marcus was projecting in court. Second, witnesses. Garrett would find people willing to testify about Sarah as a mother, teachers, neighbors, parents of Ethan's friends. People who had seen firsthand how well she cared for her son, even in impossible circumstances. Third, legal representation. Garrett knew a lawyer in a neighboring city, someone good, ethical, who didn't owe Marcus any favors. He would convince him to take the case pro bono. It wasn't a guarantee of victory, far from it, but it was a fight. It was a chance, and sometimes a chance is all a person needs. Garrett picked up the phone. It was still too early to call, but he started making lists. Names, numbers, strategies, every step he needed to take, every risk he needed to manage. And for the first time in days, he felt something beyond powerlessness. He felt purpose. He felt he was doing what he was born to do. But a part of him, the pragmatic part that had survived decades as a police officer, knew this would have a price. That Marcus would find out. That retaliation would come. And when it did, it would be ugly. Garrett was prepared for it. Or at least he thought he was. Because some storms you can't fully prepare for. You can only decide whether you're going to face them or run. And Garrett had decided to face them. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the transformation that happened between Sarah and Garrett in the following weeks wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was gradual. It was built in small moments that, individually, didn't seem to mean much, but collectively created something too solid to be ignored. It was the kind of emotional connection that happens when two broken people begin to mend themselves in each other's presence, without even realizing that's what's happening. Garrett began showing up with a frequency that became routine, but never predictable enough to create an obvious pattern that would fuel the town's gossip machine. He varied his hours, he varied his excuses. Sometimes he'd show up in the morning with coffee and bread that the bakery was going to throw away. Sometimes he'd show up in the afternoon with fruit that he bought too much of, sometimes on the weekend with a toolkit because he was passing by and remembered that leak. Every visit had a plausible justification. Every gesture could be explained as coincidence or casual kindness. But they both knew it wasn't. He would bring groceries. Never too much at a time, because too much would be too obvious. Blatant charity that would wound Sarah's still sensitive pride. But always enough. Milk, eggs, rice, chicken. Basic things that made the difference between a week of hunger and a week without. And he always wrapped them in those gentle lies. I bought it thinking I was going to make a recipe, but I changed my mind. My fridge is too full. This would spoil if someone didn't use it. Sarah knew they were lies, but she accepted them because Garrett had a way of presenting them that preserved her dignity. It wasn't, "You need this." It was, "You're doing me a favor by taking this." He offered them a ride. Every time he saw Sarah and Ethan walking in, he saw them often because he probably passed through those streets more than necessary during patrols. He would stop. He'd get out of the patrol car. "Can I give you a ride?" At first, Sarah refused. "No need. We're fine." But Garrett was persistent. "It's 40 degrees. Your son is red from the heat. Please. 5 minutes won't kill anyone." And eventually Sarah began to accept. Because pride has its limits when you see your child suffering. And those 5 minutes in the air-conditioned car became Ethan's favorite moments of the day. Is the sheriff going to show up today? He'd ask every morning with a hope that simultaneously broke and rebuilt Sarah's heart. Garrett fixed things. The door that wouldn't close properly and kept Sarah awake at night, worried about safety. The window that jammed and turned the small apartment into an unbearable oven in the summer. The shower that oscillated between freezing and boiling hot with no middle ground. The loose electrical outlet that sparked and that Sarah feared would cause a fire. Small repairs that the negligent landlord never did. And while Garrett worked always on Saturday afternoons when he didn't have a shift, always with a toolbox that seemed inexhaustible, Ethan stood beside him like a fascinated shadow. The boy was thirsting for positive male attention, for the father who is never present, for the role model every boy needs and that he never had. And Garrett, without planning, without even fully realizing it, began to fill that void. He explained what he was doing. See, you hold it like this. Firmly, but not too tightly. He let Ethan hold tools. He praised the boy when he helped, even when the help was more of a hindrance. Good job, champ. You have a knack for this. And Ethan shone. He absolutely shone with that attention, that validation. That male presence that didn't come loaded with impatience or indifference, like it did from his biological father. Sarah watched everything from the kitchen doorway or the window, pretending to do something else, but in reality, just observing. And something inside her, something that had been frozen and protected for so long, was beginning to melt. Not comfortably. Melting hurts. Because when you protect yourself with emotional ice, and that ice begins to crack, you feel everything again. The pain, the vulnerability, but also hope. And possibility. And Sarah didn't know if she wanted to feel those things. Hope hurts when you've already been disappointed. Possibility is frightening when you've already lost everything once. Ethan started asking about Garrett constantly. When is the sheriff coming again? Can he stay for dinner? Can he teach me more things? And one night, after her son's particular insistence, Sarah finally invited Garrett to a real dinner. Not just a quick coffee, but dinner. It's nothing special, she warned, embarrassed. Just pasta with sauce. Garrett smiled. Pasta with sauce is my favorite. An obvious lie, but a kind one. He stayed. And because Sarah had sold the dining table months ago, they ate sitting on the living room floor, plates in their laps, as if it were an indoor picnic. Ethan thought it was the most fun thing in the world. It's an adventure, he declared. And Garrett ate that simple pasta, probably the simplest he'd eaten in years, as if it were a banquet in a 5-star restaurant. He asked questions about the recipe. He praised the seasoning. He asked for a second helping, and Sarah realized he wasn't faking it. He genuinely enjoyed it. Not the food itself, but the moment, the company, the normalcy of it all. After dinner, Garrett stayed and helped with the dishes. He dried the plates while Sarah washed them, and they talked. Not about heavy things. Not about custody battles or debts or cruel ex-husbands, but about normal things, series they were watching, books they had read, music they liked, childhood memories. And Sarah realized she hadn't had a normal conversation, just conversation, without weight, without an agenda in so long that she had forgotten how good it was, how human it was. Ethan eventually fell asleep on the sofa, exhausted from excitement. Garrett carried him to the bedroom. The boy didn't even wake up, just murmured something about dinosaurs and snuggled against his chest. Sarah showed him where. The bedroom was, adjusted the blanket, and stood there for a moment, just watching her son sleep. And when she turned, Garrett was in the doorway, also watching. And there was something in his expression, tenderness, protectiveness, something too profound to name that, made Sarah's heart leap. They went back into the room. They sat on the old sofa. And for the first time, the silence between them was different. It was heavy, not with discomfort, but with recognition of something unspoken but felt. Sarah finally broke the silence. Why are you doing this? It wasn't the first time she'd asked, But this time it had a different weight. Because she wasn't asking about material help. She was asking about constant presence, about attention, about emotional involvement that went far beyond civic duty. Garrett took a while to answer. He looked at his own hands, then at her, and when he spoke, his voice was low but firm. Because someone needs it, and because I want to. Pause, then, more. Honestly, because when I look at you, I see someone who's fighting against the whole world and still waking up every day and choosing to keep going. And that's the rarest kind of courage there is. And because he hesitated, then he continued. And because it's been a long time since I've felt truly useful. Not just doing work, but making a difference that matters. And you and Ethan, you make me feel like I matter. That what I do matters. Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of something more complex. Garrett, you don't need to save me. He looked at her with an intensity that made her hold her breath. I know, you're saving yourself. I'm just trying to make it a little less impossible. And then he did something Sarah didn't expect. He took her hand, gently, silently asking permission, and she didn't pull away. She just stayed there, hand in his, feeling warmth, solidity, presence. And Sarah, who had built such high walls around her heart after the divorce, who had sworn never to trust a man again, never to allow herself to be vulnerable again, felt one of those walls begin to crack. Not crumble completely, but crack. And through that crack came light, possibility, a delicious fear that perhaps, just perhaps, she deserved something good. Someone good. And perhaps Garrett was that someone. They stayed like that for a time that neither of them measured, just sitting side by side, hands intertwined, in comfortable silence, while the world outside continued to be chaotic and cruel. But inside, in that small apartment with sold furniture and overdue bills, there was something resembling peace, something like security, something like home, and they both felt it. They both knew that something had changed between them, that they had crossed an invisible line from sheriff helping citizen to something much deeper, more personal, more dangerous, and more precious. When Garrett finally left that night late, because neither of them wanted the moment to end, he stopped at the door. He turned, and he said, Sarah, I won't let anything bad happen to you or Ethan, I promise. And she believed him. For the first time in years, she believed a man's promise. She believed that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone in this fight. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this matter, because what Garrett did in the days leading up to the hearing was a meticulously orchestrated campaign that combined legal resources, strategic pressure, and decisions he knew could be costly if anyone questioned his methods. But he had made a choice. He had decided that protecting Sarah and Ethan was worth any personal risk, and now it was time to turn that decision into action. He began by using the connections he had built up over 15 years in the police force. He called Michael Teresa, family lawyer in a neighboring town whom he had met at a conference years before. They weren't close friends, but they had mutual respect. Michael, I need a favor. A big one. Garrett explained the whole situation. The divorce, the systematic harassment, the fabricated custody case, Marcus's connections, Sarah's lack of resources. When he finished, there was a long pause on the line. Then Michael sighed. This is going to be war. The guy has expensive lawyers. He's got a judge in his pocket. You know the odds aren't good, even with the evidence on our side. Garrett knew. But are you going to take it? Another pause. Pro bono. She can't afford it, Michael, but she deserves a fair fight. And this isn't a fair fight. Michael laughed humorlessly. It never is. Fine, I'll take it. But you owe me one. A big one. Garrett felt relief wash over him. You have no idea how much I owe you. They began to assemble the defense. Michael came to town, met Sarah, who was paralyzed with gratitude and disbelief when she learned that a real lawyer was going to represent her. They spent hours reviewing everything. Every document, every allegation by Marcus, every piece of evidence they could gather. Michael was good. Very good. He knew exactly which buttons to push, which arguments to make, how to dismantle the narrative Marcus had constructed. First, they put together a comprehensive portfolio about Sarah as a mother and teacher. Garrett went to the school, spoke with the principal, who reluctantly but honestly admitted that Sarah was an exemplary teacher, that her personal difficulties had never affected her work. They obtained letters from students, parents, dozens of them. Parents saying how Sarah had changed their children's lives, how dedicated she was, how inspiring she was. They obtained school records showing that Ethan was a happy, healthy child with normal emotional and academic development. Nothing to indicate neglect or an inadequate environment. Then, they compiled evidence of Marcus's paternal abandonment. Garrett had documented everything in recent weeks, all the scheduled visits that Marcus canceled, all the calls he didn't make, all the child support payments that arrived late. They obtained statements from the school, confirming that Marcus never showed up for parent-teacher meetings, presentations, nothing. They obtained testimony from neighbors, confirming that Marcus never visited his son. The image of a concerned father that he sold in the lawsuit was completely contradicted by the documented reality. Michael also investigated the witnesses Marcus had presented. Most were his friends, who had never interacted with Sarah. They had never been to her apartment. They had never seen how she cared for Ethan. Their statements were vague, based on hearsay, and clearly coordinated. Michael was going to destroy their credibility in court. But there was another urgent problem: the eviction process. If Sarah lost the apartment before the hearing, it would give Marcus ammunition. See, she doesn't even have a place to live. Garrett couldn't let that happen. So he went to speak to the landlord himself. He showed up at the man's house one night, out of uniform, with a proposal. How much does she owe? Total. The landlord hesitated. For months. 5,200 reais. Garrett didn't blink. I'll pay today. And I'll pay 2 more months in advance. 7 months. A total of 9,100 reais. You freeze the eviction process and give her 6 more months to get settled. The owner looked at him suspiciously. Why? What is she to you? Garrett maintained a neutral expression. A citizen who needs a fair chance. And someone I won't let be destroyed by unfair circumstances. He took out his checkbook money, that was his. Personal savings he had set aside for emergencies. He wrote the check, 9,100 reais. Practically all his savings. He placed it on the table. Yes or no? The owner took the check. He studied it. Then he looked at Garrett. You're getting yourself into trouble for her, Sheriff. You know that, right? Garrett smiled humorlessly. It's not the first problem I've gotten myself into. It probably won't be the last. Do we have an agreement? The man sighed. We do. A 6-month extension. But after that, if she doesn't pay, I won't have a choice. Fair enough. Garrett didn't tell Sarah about the check. He only said he had talked to the landlord and that the lawsuit had been suspended. Sarah was confused but relieved. How did you manage that? I convinced him it was a good deal to give you time to recover. Good tenants are hard to find. Half-truth. But Sarah accepted it because she wanted to believe him. The hearing was scheduled. 2 weeks. Michael prepared Sarah to testify. He rehearsed questions. He prepared her for the attacks that would come. They're going to try to make you seem emotional, unstable, irresponsible. You don't take the bait. You answer calmly, factually, honestly. Understand? Sarah practiced until the answers came. Automatically, the day of the hearing arrived. Sarah was terrified. Garrett wanted to go with her, but he knew he couldn't enter the room. It would be inappropriate. It would give Marcus exactly the ammunition he wanted. So he stayed outside, pacing the hallway, trying not to go crazy with anxiety. Inside the room, it was exactly as brutal as Michael had warned. Marcus's lawyer was ruthless. He attacked everything. Sarah's financial situation, the debts, the small apartment. He insinuated emotional instability. He questioned her ability to properly care for a child while working full-time. He twisted every fact to make it seem like negligence. Marcus testified, and he lied, shamelessly. He said he had tried to maintain a relationship with his son, but Sarah made it difficult. He said he was worried about Ethan's well-being. He said he only wanted the best for the boy. You played the role of a concerned father perfectly. And Sarah, sitting there, listening to those lies, felt anger boiling over, but she controlled herself, just like Michael had taught her. When it was her turn to testify, Sarah was trembling, but she answered each question with painful honesty. Yes, she was having financial difficulties. No, that didn't affect her ability to care for her son. Ethan was fed, clothed, loved. Yes, the apartment was small, but it was clean, safe, a home. Yes, she worked full-time, but Ethan had proper care, did well in school, was a happy child, and no, she had never prevented Marcus from seeing his son. He simply chose not to show up. Michael presented the evidence, the parents' letters, the school records, the paternal abandonment documentation. He destroyed the credibility of Marcus's witnesses, showing that none of them had any real knowledge of the situation. He brilliantly argued that the entire process was retaliation by a powerful man against his ex-wife, who had dared to leave him. The judge even, though he was a friend of Marcus's, was bound by the evidence. It was very strong, very clear, and there were people watching. The local press, a state social worker. He couldn't simply ignore everything and grant custody to Marcus without appearing corrupt. So, after deliberation that seemed to last an eternity, he delivered the verdict. Primary custody remains with the mother. Ms. Morrison will have supervised visits, according to a schedule to be established. Sarah could barely process it. She had one. However, the judge continued. The court maintains concerns about the mother's financial stability. Ms. Morrison will have 6 months to demonstrate a significant improvement in her economic situation. A new evaluation will be made at the end of this period. It wasn't a complete victory. It was a conditional victory, but it was a victory. Sarah wasn't going to lose Ethan, not yet. When the gavel fell, she crumbled right there. She started to cry not from sadness, but from relief so profound it hurt. Michael put his hand on her shoulder. You did it. Now we have time to stabilize everything more. Sarah just nodded, unable to speak. When she left that courtroom, still trembling, her eyes red, she saw Garrett. He was leaning against the hallway wall, arms crossed, expression tense. When he saw her, he straightened up immediately, and from her look, he knew. She didn't need to say anything. He saw it in her face. Victory, relief, and without thinking, without caring who was watching, Sarah ran to him and threw herself into his arms. Garrett picked her up, held her tight, secure, real. He felt her body trembling against his. She felt the tears soaking his shirt, and he didn't care. He didn't care that people were watching, that gossip would start, that it would complicate everything. At that moment, the only thing that mattered was that Sarah was safe, Ethan was safe, and he had kept his promise. It's okay, he whispered. It's over. You're not going to lose him. And Sarah, for the first time in months, believed it. She truly believed that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because that night should have been a night of celebration. It should have been the moment when Sarah could finally breathe, finally believe that the worst was over. She put Ethan to bed earlier than usual. The boy was exhausted from all the excitement of the day, even without fully understanding what had happened. She carefully tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and sat there on the edge of the bed, just watching his small chest rise and fall with the deep, sleepy breaths of a child. watching his relaxed, innocent expression, the expression of a child who doesn't yet carry the worries of the world. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Sarah felt something different. Not fear, not anxiety, but peace. Fragile, cautious, but real. She had done it. She had fought against a system that was stacked against her, and she had won. Ethan was going to stay with her. They were going to stay together. Everything was going to be all right. She needed to believe that. After so long in the dark, she needed to believe that she had finally found the light. Garrett had left her house early that night. He said he had a shift, that he needed to get back to work. But before leaving, he had looked at her in a way that made her heart clench. With pride, with relief, with something deeper that neither of them dared to name yet. He had squeezed her hand for a long moment. "You were incredible today. In court, in everything." Sarah had smiled a genuine smile, not forced. "I couldn't have done it without you. Without Michael." Without her voice faltered. "Without everything." Garrett just shook his head. "You would have found a way. You always do." After he left, Sarah wandered around the small apartment with a strange feeling of lightness, as if the weight she had carried for so long had finally been lifted from her shoulders. She made tea, sat on the old sofa, and simply existed, without planning her next step, without worrying about the next crisis. Just existing, breathing, feeling profound gratitude for still being there, for still having her son, for not having lost everything. That's when she saw the note. It was on the kitchen table, under the mug Garrett had used. She picked up the paper curiously, recognized his handwritings, landed practical, masculine. "You're not alone. Not anymore." 7 words. Just 7 words. But their impact was devastating. Sarah held the paper with trembling hands, feeling something rise in her chest that was part gratitude, part overwhelming emotion she couldn't name. She wasn't alone. She had someone by her side. Someone who chose to stay even when it was difficult, even when it cost something, even when it would have been easier to leave. She carefully folded the note, as if it were a precious object, and put it in her pocket. Then she went to the front door to lock it, a habit she always double-checked before bed. A legacy from years of living alone with a young child in a neighborhood that wasn't the safest. And it was there, when she opened the door to check if it was locked, that she saw it. A brown envelope, under the door, partially tucked inside. Sarah froze. Her heart, which had finally begun to beat normally, raced again. Because an envelope under the door was never a good thing. It never was. She picked it up hesitantly, turned it over, and saw her name typed on the front. Formal, official, threatening. She tore open the envelope slowly, as if haste would change the contents. She pulled out a single sheet. You read the heading. Notice of legal action. He felt his stomach drop. He continued reading. Each word was a stab. Dr. Marcus Morrison versus Sarah Morrison. Defamation of character. Moral and professional reputational damage. Allegation. The defendant made false and malicious statements that irreparably damaged the plaintiff's reputation as a doctor and a respectable member of the community. Sarah read line by line with growing horror. Marcus claimed she had spread lies about him during their divorce proceedings. That she had told multiple people that he had been unfaithful, a negligent father, and financially abusive. That these unfounded allegations had damaged his medical practice, his reputation, and his standing in the community. He was suing her for defamation, and the amount, 100,000 reais in damage. 100,000 reais. Sarah read that number and began to laugh. Not humorously, but with that hysterical laughter that comes when reality is so absurd that you have no other reaction. 100,000 reais. She didn't have 100 reais. She barely had 10. And Marcus knew it. He knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't expect to get the money she had, no way to pay. He expected to destroy her in another way. To bury her in legal debt. To force her to hire a lawyer she couldn't afford. to make her life unsustainable until she gave up everything, including Ethan. The hidden truth that Sarah realized in that moment, standing in the doorway with that trembling paper in her hands, was that Marcus was never going to stop. Winning or losing in court didn't matter to him. He had endless resources. He had time. He had enough anger to keep attacking indefinitely. And each attack, even if unsuccessful, cost her. In money she didn't have. In emotional, energy, and mental health. Instability she needed to demonstrate for the next custody review in 6 months. It was the perfect strategy. Cruel, but perfect. He didn't need to win every battle. He just needed to keep creating battles until she no longer had the strength to fight. Until she crumbled. Until the system finally decided that she was too unstable, too problematic, and that Ethan would be better off with a stable father even if that father was a monster who used his son as a weapon. Sarah felt her legs give way. She slid down the door until she was sitting on the cold floor of the small entrance hall. The paper fell from her hand, and she stood there, just staring at the wall, processing what she had just understood. There was no victory. There was no moment when she could relax. There was no peace. There was only the next battle, and the next, and the next, until she finally broke, or Marcus finally got what he wanted. She thought about calling Garrett. She picked up her cell phone, dialed to the second-to-last number, then stopped. What was he going to do? He had already done so much. He had risked so much. He had spent money he probably didn't have to spare. He had used political connections. He had exposed himself. She couldn't keep asking. She couldn't keep dragging him into this war. It wasn't fair. Especially when she was starting to feel things for him that went far beyond gratitude. Feelings that were frightening because they meant vulnerability. And vulnerability hurt. So she put the phone aside, and she sat there in the dark hallway, hugging her knees, trying to find strength she didn't know if she still had. That night, for the first time since the hearing, Sarah cried. But they weren't tears of relief. They were tears of exhaustion. Of cruel understanding that the journey was far from over. Of fear that perhaps, eventually, Marcus would succeed. Not because he was right, but because he could continue attacking indefinitely, and she could only defend herself as long as she had energy. And her energy was running out. She eventually got up, locked the door, went to her room, laid down on the bed, but didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, trying to do impossible calculations in her head. How was she going to pay for a defense in a defamation lawsuit? Michael had already done a lot pro bono. She couldn't ask for more. And without adequate defense, Marcus would win by default. And 100,000 Riege judgment would follow her. For the rest of her life, it would make it impossible to get credit, buy a house, rebuild her life. It would be a permanent anchor pulling her down. The transformation that happened to Sarah that night was subtle, but profound. Something inside her hardened. Not in a bad way, but in a necessary way. She realized she had underestimated Marcus. She had thought that after the custody hearing, he would back down, would realize he had lost. But men like him don't back down. They escalate. And if she wanted to survive, if she wanted to protect Ethan, she would need to stop being defensive and start being strategic. She would need help, not just from Garrett, but from others. She would need to expose Marcus publicly in ways he couldn't recover from. She would need to fight fire with fire. And that was frightening. Because Sarah wasn't a confrontational person. She had always been peaceful, conciliatory, avoiding confrontation. But Marcus had turned her into a fighter, against her will. And now, she had to decide. Would she continue only reacting to his attacks? Or would she start attacking back? The next morning, when Ethan woke up and came to her room with that sleepy smile, Sarah made her decision. She was going to protect her son, no matter the cost. Even if it meant becoming someone she never wanted to be. Even if it meant open war. Because some battles you don't choose. But once you're in them, you choose to fight or give up. And Sarah Morrison wasn't going to give up. Not anymore. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened in the weeks following that envelope was the revelation of who Sarah truly was when cornered. Not the quiet, conciliatory woman she had been during years of abusive marriage. Not the passive victim Marcus had hoped she would be, but a fighting mother who had finally found not only a reason to fight, but also the necessary tools and allies. The morning after that terrible night, Sarah woke up with her decision made. She wasn't going to hide it from Garrett. She wasn't going to try to carry it alone. He had asked her to trust him. He had proven repeatedly that he deserved that trust. So she was going to truly trust him. She picked up the phone and called. His voice answered on the second ring, still hoarse with sleep. "Sarah, is everything all right? It's 6 in the morning. I know. I'm sorry, but I need to see you. Something happened." Tense silence. Then, "I'm coming." 15 minutes later, Garrett was at her door, out of uniform, his hair still messy, worry etched on his face. Sarah handed him the paper without saying anything. She watched as he read. She saw his jaw clench. She saw the anger welling up in his eyes. When he finished, he looked at her with an expression that mixed fury and determination. "That son of a bitch just won't stop, will he?" Sarah laughed humorlessly. "Apparently not." Garrett sat down next to her on the sofa. "Okay, so we changed strategy. Up until now, we've only been defending, reacting to his attacks. It's time to attack back." Sarah looked at him, confused. "How? I don't have his resources. I don't have his connections." Garrett smiled. It wasn't a cheerful smile. It was a wolf's smile, showing its teeth. "No, but you have truth. And I have a way of getting that truth to the right people." What followed was a coordinated campaign orchestrated behind the scenes by Garrett. He spoke with a local journalist, a woman he knew, who had integrity, who wasn't bought by wealthy advertisers. He told her the whole story. The harassment, the frivolous lawsuits, the paternal abandonment while feigning concern. The journalist was outraged, and she investigated. She discovered other women, employees at Marcus's office, ex-girlfriends, all with similar stories. Harassment, manipulation, abuse of power. The story came out 2 weeks later. Front page, respectable doctor or predator. Multiple women accused Dr. Morrison of a pattern of abusive behavior. It had interviews, documentation, photographs. It was devastating, and legal everything verified. Nothing that could be sued for defamation. It was real investigative journalism. The impact was immediate. Patients began canceling appointments. The hospital where Marcus had privileges launched an internal investigation. The medical board opened disciplinary proceedings. And suddenly, Marcus, who had always controlled the narrative, always been untouchable, was on the defensive. He was being publicly judged in the same way he had tried to do to Sarah. The defamation lawsuit was quietly withdrawn. No explanation. No admission of guilt. It simply disappeared. Because Marcus's lawyers realized that continuing would only bring more attention to the story. I was going to give Sarah a platform to counterattack, and they couldn't take that risk. Sarah, for the first time, felt something akin to power. Not the cruel power Marcus wielded, but the power to no longer be a silent victim. The power to fight back. And this fundamentally changed something within her. She was still kind. She was still compassionate. But now she had a backbone of steel that hadn't existed before. She had learned that boundless kindness is vulnerability, and that sometimes protecting those you love means being ruthless with those who threaten you. Garrett and Sarah became partners. Not just romantically, though that was also growing, slowly but inevitably, but true partners, facing the world together. And Ethan, observing everything with the eyes of a child who didn't fully understand but felt it, began to have something he had never had before. A real family. Not perfect, but real and present. 3 months after the hearing, Sarah received a call. It was from the school principal. Her heart tightened, expecting more trouble. but his voice was different. "Sarah, I called to offer you the position of pedagogical coordinator, with a significant salary increase. Are you interested?" Sarah was speechless. Interested? That solved financial problems. It demonstrated stability for the next custody review. It was a real victory. She accepted, of course. And that night, when Garrett came to dinner, a routine that had become established, where he showed up 3 or 4 times a week, she told him. He picked her up, spun her in the air, both laughing like children. And when he put her back down, both still laughing, something passed between them. Recognition. They no longer needed to pretend it was just friendship. They no longer needed to be afraid of feelings. Garrett leaned in. Sarah didn't pull away. And when they kissed finally, after months of tension and denial, it was like the last piece of a puzzle falling into place. Like coming home after being lost for so long. Like promise and relief and beginning, all at once. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still challenges. There was still the next custody review in 3 months. Marcus was still out there, wounded but not destroyed. But it was a beginning. It was a solid foundation to build something real on. And for the first time in years, Sarah believed. She believed in the future. She believed in possibilities. She believed she deserved love, stability, happiness, and she was fighting for it, every day. Look, if you've made it this far, if you followed every moment of this journey with Sarah and Garrett, you know that this story isn't just about them. It's about all the people who are fighting battles that no one sees, who are rebuilding themselves after everything has fallen apart, who are learning that vulnerability isn't weakness and that asking for help isn't giving up. If this kind of story resonates with you, if you want to continue following narratives like this real, raw, but full of hope, subscribing, here's the way to keep walking with me. It's the way to tell me that stories like this matter. And look, I need to know, are you with her until the end? Do you believe that people like Sarah deserve to fight and win? Then comment below, I'm with you until the end. Let me see how many people truly understand the weight of this journey and are willing to root for endings that are earned, not handed to them. If this touched you in any way, if at any point you felt her pain, her hope, her strength, leave a like so I know. It's not about numbers. It's about connection. It's about knowing that on the other side there are people who feel, who understand, who care about stories of real people facing real things. And there's a video over here that continues in the same vein. Another story of someone fighting against a system that failed, finding strength where they didn't expect it, building something good from the ruins. Click and follow me there, because this journey, it's far from over, and I want you with me until the end.